Shane, how you doing, man?
Doing great. What about you, Shannon?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right, bro. We've been sitting here talking about a number of things, off camera, right? But we started talking about um, economics. One of your favorite topics, and
It's an interesting topic.
yeah, it's an interesting topic, and a topic that I think a lot of people find what do they call economics? The dismal science.
Yeah.
So they find it dismal, and
Well, there
also
are a lot of dismal people that are economists, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. In your opinion, when you talk about economics, right? You've got people who they're numbers people. They want to do
Mhm.
statistics. They want to do numbers. They want to run the data, and stuff like that. And then you've got like more. I want to say social and historical analysis,
Mhm.
right? So I'm just thinking here, like you've got somebody like Thomas Sowell, right? Um, who is because he's still alive, who is much more of a, I guess, he doesn't do data analysis. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm not to say that he can't. I'm sure that he can, but he has a certain way of doing economics, and that's more social, cultural trends and historical trends and stuff like that to tell people what an economic the economic outcomes of a particular group or groups, say why they tend to succeed financially or socially more than others, stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
And then you've got like the data driven ones, right? So
Well, there's an economist named Ludwig von Mises, and
okay.
and he was the founder of the Austrian School of Economics,
Hmm.
and and one of the big things that he would argue was that economics is not a that economics by nature is not a mathematical statistics driven science.
Hmm.
Now you can use those things for modeling, you can use those things to kind of, you can tap into math and stuff to analyze data and everything, but ultimately what it is, it's the study of human action. It's the
Hmm.
study of what are the incentive structures that people have to act.
Hmm.
It's so he would argue that it's more akin um to that history would align much more with a study like history,
Hmm.
than a field like sociology, or a
Okay.
field like I'm trying to think of what the other, well, that there's much less overlap with the social sciences
Hmm.
than what most modern economists will try to say.
Okay.
you,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
because
So
a lot of the time economics gets lumped in with fields like sociology,
right.
and a lot of the time, sociology is just another social science that they focus in on a bunch of data and statistics and everything, and they try to use those things to argue for revolutionary change in a
Right.
society or culture, that they want to try to
Right.
overturn norms.
Right.
That's ultimately what the core is. I have never met a sociologist, or I've never had a sociology professor, or
Mhm.
or a professor at college that taught sociology that was not a revolutionary that wanted to overturn social norms. Now, maybe they exist.
Right.
I have no idea, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I've never actually encountered one.
Me either.
There might be a textbook example of one, but I've never
Yeah.
met one.
Yeah.
But economists have a tendency to be more they want to look at structures, but they want to look more into um what, or at least from the perspective of the Austrian school, and from the
Mhm.
perspective of von Mises, and the
Mhm.
economists that actually, in my opinion, have something interesting to say.
Mhm.
They're going to look at things from the point of view of why do people act the way they do.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what that does, that begins to open the door to incorporate morality and ethical considerations,
Mm-hmm.
which are typically blocked out by most what you would call like neoliberal and neoconservative
Mm-hmm.
economists, even people like Milton Friedman,
Mm-hmm.
who a lot of people revere and is very, very popular. He is someone who would be very amoral in his economic analysis. Now
Mm-hmm.
he would have had a moral framework that he would have held to personally, but
Right.
he would argue that morality would really not have any role in economics. That economics is just about like the flow of money and it's about prices and stuff like that. What the Austrians would argue is that the flow of money, prices, and all those things are all the result of humans acting.
Uh-huh. And acting, and would that be acting based on certain, like a certain sense of morality? I
Yeah,
mean,
that would be a part of it. It would also be just what's going on right in front of them.
mm-hmm.
Are they in a time period where there's a lot of scarcity?
Mm-hmm.
Are they in are they in a time period where there's a lot of surplus?
Yeah.
Like let's say the period like the Great Depression period, there was a lot of scarcity, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
in America, the period following World War II, there was a lot of surplus. So
Mm-hmm.
the Austrians would argue that people are going to behave radically differently in those two situations,
Right.
you know.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Now,
But
now what?
then the Austrians have a lot to say as far as like their theory of money goes,
Mm-hmm.
their theory of money and credit. They have what's called the theory of the business cycle, which
Mm-hmm.
for people that aren't familiar with that, the business cycle is this phenomenon that was noticed by economists very early on,
Mm-hmm.
where roughly about every 10 to 12 years, the
Mm-hmm.
economy just ruptures and just collapses.
Okay.
You end
Mm-hmm.
up having what's called a recession, and in
Mm-hmm.
rare cases the recession can lead to a depression
Mm-hmm.
where you end up having all this falling demand and falling prices, people can't find work and everything. And it's weird because this cyclically tends to happen about every decade,
Mm-hmm.
about plus or minus maybe 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
this is
yeah.
the thing. If you were to go and pull up like a Wikipedia page and look up recessions in American history, the
Mm-hmm.
thing you'll notice is that about once a decade you have a recession.
And why is that? I mean, if you talk about, like, okay, history doesn't repeat itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, why do we have recessions about every 10 years? Is that like some kind of moral decline or some
Well,
kind of?
first of all, I think it's interesting that modern man is the only modern man is the only specimen of mankind that would say that history does not repeat itself, right? Or
Okay.
that history
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't repeat itself. You
Mm-hmm.
know, every other human that's ever existed that was not basted in the juices of modernity
Mm-hmm.
were able to admit what they saw before them, which is that history does repeat itself, that humans do repeat themselves, and that humans imitate, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of goes along with Girard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so what the Austrians would say about the business cycle is that it's the result of the debasement of money and credit. Now, what that means is that you've basically got bankers
Mm-hmm.
that end up essentially printing a whole bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
They print up a whole bunch of excess money so that they can loan it.
Okay.
When the economy gets to the point where you've got where money is an established mature thing, typically like paper money or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What you end up having are banking institutions that pop up, and those banking institutions um become clearinghouses for not only for people to deposit money into them, but they become clearinghouses for loans, right? So they start
Mm-hmm.
loaning out money. Well, what the banks end up doing over time, and a lot of the time it's at the behest of the government, but a lot of the time it's at the behest of their own self-interest, because the banks are typically empowered to be able to print as much money as they want. Um, or maybe there's a limitation. Maybe they're allowed to print 10 times the amount of money that they have in deposit, if that makes sense. Do you have any
Sort of.
questions at that point?
Well, yeah. I mean, so I thought that the Federal Reserve was the only one that's able to print
So
the money.
the Federal Reserve is the bank for banks.
Okay.
So when you deposit money at, let's say, Bank of America, for instance, or
Chase Bank.
yeah, Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, wherever,
Mhm.
you deposit your money into that bank, and then that bank has a bank account at the Federal Reserve Bank where they
Okay.
deposit your deposits. And then the Federal Reserve has this magic thing that they do for the banks, which is when the bank deposits, let's say you deposit $10,000 into your bank account. Let's say that a pile of money fell down from the sky, 10
Mhm.
grand, and
Mhm.
and you and this money, it falls right into your lap. It came from nowhere. You're like, wow, what am I going to do with this money? And you think to yourself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to go deposit it into my bank account.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you go put it into your bank account at Chase, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then when you deposit 10 grand into your bank account at Chase, they deposit it into their bank account at the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Then the way Chase makes money is through loaning money out to people, right?
Mhm.
Mortgages,
Mhm.
credit cards, vehicle loans, whatever. So what Chase does, or so the Federal Reserve tells Chase, okay, so you deposited $10,000 into your bank account
Mhm.
with us from your
Mhm.
customer. So now we have turned that $10,000 into $100,000 worth of credit that you can loan out to make money with. So
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
so so basically $90,000 that didn't exist before was created out of nothing from you depositing $10,000 into your Chase bank account.
Right.
And that $90,000 that was created will be lent out by Chase for
Mhm.
vehicle loans, for home mortgages, for credit card, for credit cards, for all kinds of different loans.
Yeah.
And the interest rates are going to vary that they're going to be able to get. But so you can think about it like this. Let's say the average rate of interest they're getting on their loans is like, let's say, maybe 10%.
Mhm.
That means they're going to be making a 100% return on the money that you deposited into the bank.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay.
Okay, now,
So,
so let's process this. All right,
yeah.
so what kind of questions?
Okay. Okay. So now when you put that when the money goes into the Chase Bank and then
Hmm.
they take that money and it goes to the wait, it goes to Chase and then it goes to the Federal
And then
Reserve.
Chase deposits it into the Fed, into the Federal
Okay.
Reserve. So a short name for the Federal Reserve, you can just call it the Fed. That's what
Right.
a lot of people
Appreciate it.
call it, is the Fed.
Okay. Now when they loan that money out to other people
Hmm.
and then those people are not able to pay back, say their debts, I guess, right?
Hmm.
What happens to what happens? Does the Federal Reserve say, well, we gotta, we gotta, we gotta shut down Chase Bank, or we
No.
got, like you say, okay, all
So,
these
so
people
yeah,
that
so
Chase
you're
was
saying,
lending money out to,
yeah,
yeah,
so you're saying somebody bought a car
mm-hmm,
and and they get to a point where they can't afford the car payments anymore.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Let's say, let's say, unfortunately, they lost their job, or maybe they couldn't afford it to begin with.
mm-hmm,
So so what will happen in that case is they will end up, they'll stop making their payments,
mm-hmm,
and then the creditor will repo their vehicle, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And then the creditor will auction their vehicle off to try to get whatever they can for it. So let's say it was let's say that it was a $20,000 vehicle, right?
mm-hmm,
So they borrowed 20 grand on it. Let's say they paid like $4,000 worth of their payments for
mm-hmm,
the vehicle.
mm-hmm,
And then let's say that the bank was able to auction the vehicle off for like 10 grand. So 10 plus 4 is 14,000. So the bank is currently underwater $6,000, right?
mm-hmm,
So the bank is underwater $6,000. What they would do is they would probably try to go after the person they would go into collections where they would try to collect the money. Let's say the person filed for bankruptcy. So then what Chase would do is they would write off that loan as a loss.
okay,
So
mm-hmm,
that'll be written off as a business expense. Um,
mm-hmm,
and what the Fed will do is they'll say, okay, that money, it didn't exist before, so it no longer exists now. So it
mm-hmm.
just disappears.
Okay, okay, and
Because something people have to remember is what the federal domestically, what the Federal Reserve facilitates is a system where bankers are empowered to loan out money that never existed to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like, right, so think about it. You have to work for money, right?
Right. Right.
You have to have a job
Yeah.
where we're earning money. You have to be able to buy and sell things so
Mm-hmm.
you can earn money off of a profit off of buying and selling things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to work. You have to work for your money, right?
Right.
Now banks, on the other hand, there's this magical little thing. It's called fractional reserve banking,
Mm-hmm.
which which is a mechanism that the Fed facilitates, which creates money out of nothing and
Mm-hmm.
allows them to loan it out and charge you interest for it. So
Right.
they're
Okay.
able to charge you interest for something art that was artificially created, ex nihilo, just
Mm-hmm.
out of nothing. Um, the money's created from nothing, right? That's a very, very
Mm-hmm.
important thing for people to understand. And
Mm-hmm.
then they loan it out to you and they charge you interest on it. Now
Mm-hmm.
think about it. Think about this. The interest that they're charging you, that you're going to have to pay back to them, that money represents your work, your labor,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Okay.
So they're loaning you money that was created from nothing, that nobody worked for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then you're having to repay them. You're having to repay them back what they lent you plus interest, which is siphoning, which is siphoning, um uh which is really in the long run a net loss for you, because
Okay.
what they're doing is they are siphoning off money that represents your work, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In exchange for a loan, for in exchange for money that they lent you that never existed to begin with. The whole it's like a magician's trick,
Yeah. Okay.
if that makes any sense.
Okay. Yeah. Let's try to put it a in a non financial scenario. Is there a way to do that? Like, okay, they're loaning you money that never existed in the first place.
Mhm.
Plus they're charging you interest, which is just more money on top of that, right?
Well, the thing is, I think it's very difficult to put it into a real world example, because even if, let's say, you're counterfeiting or you're scamming people, you're
Mhm.
putting work into that, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
let's say you're creating fake IDs, counterfeit IDs or something.
Mhm.
You know, that's wrong, and all that, and it's illegal and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, you're putting work into that.
Mhm. Mhm.
No work is going into creating the money that is being lent to you,
Mhm.
that's essentially putting you into debt bondage,
Okay. Okay.
you
Okay.
know? And
Yeah.
look, this is the thing. The ancients had a very, very clear understanding of what usury does to people.
Mhm.
Usury is the gateway to making you into a debt slave,
Okay.
you
And
know?
usury would be charging interest.
Charging interest on a loan,
Mhm.
or paying interest on a loan,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
thing is, this is a very important mechanism to understand,
Mhm.
because the thing is, they try to make it seem like it's all based on these complex formulas and it's this big
Mhm.
thing only eggheads can understand and everything. It really isn't. What it is, it's just, dude, it's just a big scam.
Right.
If you want to know who the greatest scammers on the planet are, just go to
Mhm.
Wall Street. I'm telling you, man,
Yeah.
those people, they're the biggest scammers on the planet, you
Mhm.
know? And the
Mhm.
reason they're up there is because Wall Street is right. It's right there at the teat where all the new money is created.
Right,
That's the
right.
whole reason that they're there.
But now you just said all the new money is created, but now this money is being created out of nothing, right? It's just
Right.
being printed.
Ex
So
nihilo.
right, okay. So now if you're printing money out of nothing, right? It's just
Mhm.
being printed. What doesn't that have an effect on the economy at large,
Yeah.
right? Wouldn't you say that isn't that what leads to like inflation?
Yes, yeah. So what
Okay.
ends up happening? So inflation can be caused from several different things. So inflation can be caused. Let's say that um so let's say that there's a big crop failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say in America, for instance, there was a big crop failure of wheat.
Mm-hmm.
So like let's say 50% of the wheat crop got wiped out because of some big weather event or something.
Mm-hmm.
Then you would expect for the price of flour and anything made pasta, anything made out of wheat to increase,
Mm-hmm.
to increase whenever that harvest takes place, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with half the expected harvest.
Right.
So that's driven by scarcity of the good. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
that can cause inflation,
Mm-hmm.
but inflation is also caused by excess printing of money.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
so now this kind of leads us into something that's called to what I had mentioned before, called the business cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So economists for years and years and years have been mystified, and this goes back to even the 1700s. They
Okay.
were mystified at how it seemed like over a 10-year period there'd be this big economic boom where it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like everybody was getting rich.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like everybody was doing great, and then all of a sudden, roughly at the end of 10-year time of a 10-year period, of course plus or minus a few years,
Mm-hmm.
um the economy went into free fall, went into collapse. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, everybody who had been feeling groovy and feeling great, and everybody felt rich and everything, the
Mm-hmm.
floor falls out and everybody's broke. And
Mm-hmm.
economists for years and years and years were thinking, what in the world is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
This is so strange. We can't really understand this.
Yeah.
Well, the Austrian School of Economics are the ones who I believe have the correct explanation for what happens there. So what they say is that over the 10-year period, there's all this printing of new money.
Mm-hmm.
And and you may be asking, where's the new money coming from? Well, what the Austrians would say is in most cases it's coming from all these excessive loans,
Okay.
because oftentimes the new money, when it enters into the economy, it enters in through the form of loans.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's through the increasing of the national debt, and then that money gets spent into circulation,
Mm-hmm.
or it's banks loaning out businesses a bunch of money, or customers a whole bunch of money so they can go out and buy a car that they really couldn't afford to begin with, or a house they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't afford to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
or loaning money to a business that's going to expand,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not really a prudent thing for them to expand. Maybe it doesn't really
Right.
make much sense for them to expand, but they're going to do it because the loan is artificially cheap, in the sense that interest rates are much lower than really what they ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
um, so what ends up happening is you have this big cluster of all these excessive loans, and you have all this money going to circulation. And the thing is, when the money first enters circulation, it it makes everybody feel like they're rich, and
Right.
and the reason is because if you're working in a business, businesses start to traffic at businesses starts to increase. Let's say it's a clothing
Mm-hmm.
store, let's say it's a car dealership, whatever, because more money begins circulating. So people start feeling rich initially. But then as
Mm-hmm.
that money starts percolating through the economy, prices start to increase,
Mm-hmm.
because you have more demand in the form of
Mm-hmm.
money,
Mm-hmm.
chasing the same amount of goods. So what happens is the price of those goods, the amount of money it takes to trade to trade for those goods, it increases the amount of money
Okay.
it requires.
Mm-hmm.
But then what ends up happening is, at one point or another, the loans are getting paid back, and the money is slowly being withdrawn from the economy, in the form of the loans getting paid back. So
Mm-hmm.
so the money that didn't exist to begin with, that was created to loan out to people, business owners who wanted to expand their businesses, customers who wanted to buy new cars and everything, as they're making their payments and the money is going back into the nothing that it came from.
Mm-hmm.
um then there's less and less and less money circulating in the economy, right?
Okay.
Then what
Mm-hmm.
happens, as there's less and less money circulating in the economy, foot traffic in businesses decreases.
Okay.
People have less money to buy things in
Mm-hmm.
comparison to the way it was a few years ago, when
Mm-hmm.
everything was crazy, the champagne was flowing, everybody was having a great time. It was like the 1920s, right? Like,
Right.
people talk
The,
about the
the gold,
1920s.
the yeah, the gold, the Was it called the Golden Age or the
Yeah,
Roaring Twenties?
yeah, the Roaring Twenties.
Mm-hmm,
And what happens is all of a sudden the roar turns to a shriek,
mm-hmm,
and everything comes to a halt.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so what ends up happening at the end of the boom, you have what's called the bust.
Okay.
And the bust takes place in the form of it becomes this crisis where the guy who expanded his business because initially he saw all the increased foot traffic, he
Mm-hmm,
expanded his business, and now he's got very little foot traffic because nobody has any money anymore.
mm-hmm.
So he ended up putting all these resources into expanding his business, and there are no customers there to go and patron his new expansion, right?
Okay.
the
Yeah.
the the customer who bought a new car
Mm-hmm,
gets laid off
mm-hmm,
because the business that he or she worked at,
mm-hmm.
no, they had to unfortunately lay people off because they didn't have the money to make payroll, you know.
Right.
And then people who had bought homes,
Mm-hmm,
they get laid off. They can't afford to make their mortgage payments, da 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 da. And then all of a sudden you're at the you're in the middle of the bust.
okay. Now
And
let me
prices
just,
start falling.
yeah, let me interject right there because I want to ask a question. Is that what you would say happened during COVID? Right? Because everything was sort of
Mhm,
um, people weren't able to go into work. People weren't
mhm.
able to, businesses weren't able to.
And people were paid to stay home, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. And so now that we're out of that, um, you know, I guess what I'm asking is, what are the true what would be the true ramifications of something like that? What happened with COVID? I mean, you definitely saw like a lot of businesses shutting down. Not, companies maybe not completely shutting down, but they had to close like a lot of stores. You know.
So yeah, so the thing is, you're seeing a lot of stores are getting closed all over the country. The
Mhm.
media hasn't been reporting it. Like, I know
Okay.
there were a whole bunch of Walgreens that closed down, a whole bunch of 7-Elevens have closed down,
Hmm.
um, a whole bunch of, I think even Dollar General closed down a bunch of stores. And
Hmm.
normally when things are tough, dollar stores do super well.
Hmm.
Um,
A lot of restaurants.
yeah, a lot of restaurants have been closing down, and the
Mhm.
media hadn't been reporting them. But I'm guessing that after January, I'm sure they're going to be reporting. I'm sure they're going to be saying, it's weird how we went from being the greatest economy in history to things aren't all that great, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think so. So what ends up happening is you had the COVID boom, where
Hmm.
you had all these people that were at home. They People were working from home, and then people were also being paid on unemployment,
Right.
to stay home and not work. Now, I'm not criticizing that because look, people have got to do what they got to do. If the government shut down your place of work,
Hmm.
I mean, you have to be able to pay your bills and you have to be able to eat. Like, I mean, there is no way around it. But
Hmm.
the ramification of that was you had a lot of people that were at home, and so they had a bunch of free time to buy things on the internet. They had a bunch
Hmm.
of time to order takeout and everything. So what that did was it artificially increased prices on the things
Hmm.
that people were buying in clusters.
Okay. Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so then that ended up leading to the to what people are calling now the great inflation, right?
Okay.
Where inflation rates skyrocketed, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I mean, and so then now we're at a time where like ground beef is like double the price it was 5 years ago. Yeah,
Right.
a lot of stuff, and people that are watching this they're gonna be able to identify with this very very well. You
Yeah.
can look at what was the cost of gas in 2020 versus now. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah.
not that hard. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be an egghead to be able to go out and seek that out.
Right.
So now at the current price level that the things are at, and
Hmm.
remember, it's much easier for prices to go up than prices to go down.
Hmm.
Economists call prices that have gone up, they call them sticky prices. And the reason they call them
Okay.
sticky prices is that prices will go up, but they typically do not go down.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now Now you may see an increase in discounts and sales and stuff that stores are offering and that
Mhm.
the people are offering, but you're not going to see the average price level drop.
Right.
The only time that that ever happens is when there's a big crisis,
Mhm.
and that's called deflation. It
Okay.
is when it deflation is the opposite of inflation. It is when the
Mhm.
price level drops.
Mhm.
But you may end up seeing discounts and things go on sale and everything. But now what you're into now what you're seeing is people can afford, and people watching this will be able to identify with this. I know it's true for me. I know it's true for you.
Mhm.
People can afford to buy less when, let's say, they go out to eat. People can
Mhm.
afford to buy less when they go to the grocery store.
Mhm.
People may not have had to think as much about um how much they're driving,
Mhm.
4 or 5 years ago, but
Right.
now it's something we really have to think about. You really have to
Yeah.
think about, okay, I can't afford to gas up once a week. I can only
Right.
afford to gas up once every couple of weeks or once every
Right.
week and a half.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so the thing is, what ends up happening is the boom, which pushes all the prices up.
Mhm.
It ends up, when everyone's not feeling groovy anymore and stuff, and they're like, okay, I got to get back to regular life and everything. Then what ends up happening is they're trying to get back to normalcy. Their their wages and salary and the amount of money they make, it hasn't gone up, but the
Mhm.
cost of everything has gone up because of the boom.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and then what happens is they have to economize and they have to consume less than what they consumed before, and that causes businesses to suffer, and
Okay.
that causes the economy to suffer as a whole. And the solution for that is going to be it's going to be it's going to be really one of two things, or maybe a combo. It's either going to be prices are going to have to drop down to an
Mhm.
affordable level for people,
Mhm.
or people's wages and salaries and the amount of money they make is going to have to go up.
Okay. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
the question is, which one of those is more likely? I think there's a really good argument to be made that one is more likely than the other, because if you're going to ask, if you want to ask yourself, how likely is I'm going to get a raise from my boss?
Mhm.
A lot of people are going to say it's not very likely, right?
Right.
And yeah, and then at the same time, if you ask, what's the likelihood that the price of milk is going to drop 25% at the grocery store, or the cost of ground beef, or the cost of chicken, or the cost of fruit or salads at, packs of salad at the
Mhm.
store, what's the likelihood those are going to drop in price? I'd say that's pretty unlikely too,
Right.
because prices are sticky, you know,
Mhm. Mhm. So
and
so yeah.
and wages tend to be sticky the other way.
Mhm.
You
So
know,
so
yeah,
what is the speaking from a moral perspective, we talk about, like you talked about, economics sort of being devoid of any kind of moral compass.
mhm,
And I mean, not in every school of economics, right? You talk about Austrian economics being having a moral component there. Um, what what benefit does having a moral um, perspective about, say, like the economy have on have on the economy and government spending and efficiency and all of that, right? Like, uh, will it create a better system, or I mean, is that just more of like wanting to have? Um, you understand what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that right now, the only responsibility, the only responsibility that people feel in corporate America,
Hmm.
largely, and I'm sure there are probably exceptions to the rule I'm about to say, but
Hmm.
in corporate America, most people feel a responsibility to make the company that they're in charge of more profitable,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's their number one purpose for existence, is to,
Hmm.
especially if it's a company that's publicly traded, like on the New York Stock Exchange.
Hmm.
The A government agency, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, tells them by law, your only responsibility is to increase your shareholders' value. So
Hmm.
like that might mean doing stock buybacks, that might mean paying out dividends to your shareholders, that or that's doing strategic planning to increase the value of your company.
Hmm.
Well, the thing is, you I'm not saying you don't need that, because if you don't have people that are looking at optimizing efficiency and stuff, your economy is going to fall apart.
Right.
But I think where the moral component comes in is you say, okay, we've increased profits by 25%. We're
Mm-hmm.
25% more profitable this year than we were last year.
Mm-hmm.
What what a moral company would do, in my opinion, is they would say, okay, what share of our increased profitability do our employees deserve?
Right. Okay.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is,
Or
which would be like they need a raise.
yep, yeah, yeah,
Right.
because this is the thing. If the employees were all to were just to disappear tomorrow, 100% of them were to disappear from the company, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter how big the building is, it doesn't matter how big the factories are, it doesn't matter if they've got giga servers and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's all going to be meaningless. It doesn't matter. None of it's
Right.
going to mean anything, right?
Yeah. You don't have
Because
it. You don't have labor. You don't have anybody
yep,
to work. Yeah. Yeah.
yep.
Now, okay. But now let's throw this in there. Let's throw this in there. If you have a company says, well, look, um, yeah, maybe the right thing to do is give the employees more money, right? And I'm just speaking here of like
Hmm.
in terms of Americans being employed by companies. Say, well, okay, the right thing to do is to give them a raise. Well, the CEOs and whoever the founder owner of the company says, well, I don't really want to do that. So let me take my business overseas,
Hmm.
and I'll you know we can get the Chinese or the Indians to uh to do it. You know, um, you know I mean, isn't that profitable for the company, right? Because they say, well, we can charge, that it's less, it's
Hmm.
cheaper to get labor from overseas because they're not going to demand that we pay them, you know, pay them what Americans would consider decent wages.
Well,
Um,
so I think the best way to look at that is to say that human action liberated of morality will ultimately create a hell on earth.
mhm,
So look at things like the opium wars in China.
mhm,
That was all
mhm,
fought because the British wanted to deal drugs into opium into China and
mhm,
turn every Chinese man into an opium addict.
mhm,
And the Chinese emperor, who's looking out for the best interest of his people, said no.
mhm,
And so what did
mhm,
the British do? The British sent their navy over there, and they held the Chinese emperor at gunpoint and said, "You're going to allow us to traffic as many drugs as we want to into your country, unless you want a bullet in your head." And the Chinese emperor capitulated, and that led to what the Chinese call the century of humiliation.
mhm,
And
mhm.
that's one of the reasons to this day that the Chinese are very, very skeptical of all things Western.
Yeah,
Is because every one of them have family members that died as opium addicts.
yeah. They probably
Um,
feel very slighted by that, and
they're
that's
pissed.
yeah.
And this is the thing. Like Franklin Delano Roosevelt's family, that's how they made their money. What was trafficking Turkish opium into China? They
Ooh,
they call it the whenever you see some blue blood family that says that they made their money in what they call like the Eastern trade, or they call it the Far Eastern trade,
mhm.
that means that they come from a family of drug dealers. You know, and
Shane,
and so
you gonna get us in trouble here talking about
yeah,
Roosevelt, bro. He was a king, bro. We can't talk about Roosevelt.
yeah. But look, and I'm not saying that Roosevelt, his ancestors made their
Mhm,
money off of trafficking
mhm,
drugs into China. You know,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
but I guess my point is that when you liberate human action from morality, you can justify actions like that.
yeah,
You
just
you can
value.
you could justify slave trading.
Mhm.
You could justify you could justify
Slave
buy
labor.
yeah, slave labor. You could justify buying
Mhm,
and selling human embryos.
mhm,
You can justify, and then you can justify relocating factories overseas
mhm.
to take advantage of essentially slave labor.
Right.
So
Sweatshops.
yeah, so the thing is, ultimately, um the modern economic framework says there is no room for morality here. There's only room for efficiency. Well, the thing is that if you don't have morality, you are barreling toward your own self-destruction,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and that's something
Here, I'll say one last thing.
mhm,
We are not here to serve the economy. The economy is here to serve us,
yes.
right? And
Mhm,
every human being deserves a decent life.
mhm,
They deserve to be materially comfortable,
mhm,
whatever that means in whatever time period they're living in, because materially comfortable in like 1800 is very different from materially comfortable today.
right.
But the thing is, every person fundamentally deserves that. Now,
Mhm,
there may be different prescriptions for what that would look like.
mhm,
Um, but the thing is, there should be a moral impetus on people that own businesses
mhm,
to think in terms of, we've increased profitability by 25%. Okay,
mhm,
so the question is, what percent of that belongs to the people that are actually making this thing happen?
mhm, mhm,
To the people that are actually working, that are the people whose labor is actually making that that made that increased profitability possible.
right.
Is their share of it 15%? Is their share of it all of it? Is their share of it 12.5%, which would be half? Who knows? I mean,
Mhm,
that would be a question really for all of them to decide, right? So
yeah.
that would kind of be the role of the labor union.
Mm,
Now
okay.
this is the thing. So somebody like me, I've got enemies kind of on both sides, because I'm not in favor of a labor union having a monopoly over a body of labor the way that
Yeah,
it's regulated into existence in America.
right. Mhm,
But I do think it's a good idea for workers to be organized,
mhm, mhm.
so
Yeah,
that they can articulate themselves.
right. Yeah,
You,
yeah.
you know,
So
you know
what?
what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, because I know people, especially large corporations and companies, really have a problem with unions. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the problem is that, so the way labor unions work in the United States is, if I become the so let's say that you and I worked for Starbucks, okay?
mhm, mhm,
And we were able to successfully establish a Starbucks labor union, in whatever state or local area we're in.
mhm.
Well, the way the federal government regulates things, nobody can come in and replace us.
Okay.
We're granted by the Bureau of Labor Relations, the BLR. We're essentially granted a monopoly over that body of labor.
Okay. Now,
So so
would this be like other Americans being able to replace us, or people overseas, or
Oh,
both?
no. So what that means is that no other employees could try to replace our labor union with a different labor union.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I
For
understand.
let's say we represent 10 Starbucks stores, or let's say we represent all Starbucks workers, or we represent like Starbucks workers in one state or a county, or something like that.
Mhm.
No other union can push us out once we're established.
Okay. Mhm,
That would be unless we decided to just back off, or to basically to eliminate our labor union. That would open the body of laborers up for them to hold a secret ballot to replace us with another labor union.
mhm,
So what that does is the way the labor unions are regulated in the US, what it does is it opens up labor unions to become very, very corrupt very, very fast.
mhm, mhm.
you know,
Okay.
if something cannot be replaced by something better,
Mhm,
then it's going to become very corrupt and inefficient, you know?
mhm, mhm. Is that why I don't want to put this in there? I don't know how, because I don't really know how that works, but is that why you might uh, say crime syndicates interject themselves into unions
That's exactly why.
so quickly? Okay,
Yep.
okay. I'm,
That's why
yeah,
the mob loved getting involved in labor unions back in the 60s and 70s.
yeah,
You know,
okay.
you know because you think about it like this, you have a guaranteed you have guaranteed union dues that are being paid in with every paycheck,
Hmm.
each week or month, or however the workers are paid.
Hmm.
So the union has guaranteed money coming in,
Hmm.
and so that's an opportunity for whoever's leading it to make quite a cushy income.
Mhm.
And then there's also a lot of influence that comes with it. So they could go into some backdoor deal or in some
Mhm.
back room, and say, well, we will endorse you for president, or we will endorse you for Congress, or we'll throw our support behind you, but I expect you to do this, this, and this for me, or I
Mhm.
expect you to, there's this beach house I've been eyeing. It would be a really nice thing if um if somehow I could have access to it. I don't have to own it, but let's say maybe you were to set up a little trust that just owned the house, and then I could have
Mhm.
access to it for a couple weeks a year. I would really like that. You know, so so
Yeah.
so but the thing that allows that type of system to exist is the fact that the unions can't be replaced.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what I would argue is for um for unions to compete with each other for workers.
Okay. Mhm.
And then what I think would happen is the unions would understand, look, if we're not doing a good job at advocating for our workers, then we
Mhm.
can always be replaced.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and ultimately I believe that workers will choose the best union to represent them.
Mhm. Mhm.
you know
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a sort of a moral compass right there, right?
right.
To interject.
and
Yeah.
and that's not a popular position to hold.
Really. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because well, the thing is, like,
It goes against their interests.
but this is the thing. If you look at it from the point of view that a if you look at an organization like a business, like a Fortune 500 company or something, if you look at it, rather than trying to look at it from the point of view as it's a machine,
Hmm.
and and labor is like a component, or like a fuel for it or something.
Hmm.
And your job as a CEO is to tinker with the machine and to make it spit out more stuff,
Hmm.
requiring less fuel.
Hmm.
Instead of looking at it from that point of view, which inevitably, looking at it from that point of view, you begin to look at it as your own little personal kingdom.
Hmm. Hmm.
When you stop looking at it from that point of view, and if you look at it as if you look at it in if you look at it from the point of view as it's almost like a giant system of collaboration.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's not saying that the lowest worker is as important as as somebody who's on the board or something, because the person on the board, they have to be talented people to be able to navigate the waters of the market, and to
Right.
figure out to figure out the big picture stuff. But
Yeah.
I think the perspective should be that everyone deserves to be rewarded, because we're all in this together.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
if
Right.
if
Right.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
That does make sense. Yeah. And it's also sort of, to me, it's like it's the best way to sort of, having an altruistic spirit that, we're all in this together. If we're going to make this work and be efficient, we have to care about everyone within the in the company, or everyone in the corporation. And that's not to say, like you said, like people that, CEOs and stuff, I think they do, I mean, they have to take a lot more risk as far as,
Hmm.
being a, losing money, right? And if they're not thinking about that, then yeah, people who are at the lower levels, well, they're going to be out of a job and lose money too. So,
And what's interesting about somebody like Henry Ford, for instance.
mhm,
He was a very interesting guy, very, very interesting, and very, very smart.
mhm,
Um, People told him he was going to go bankrupt if he paid his workers the amount that he did.
mhm,
I forget how much of a pay raise he ended up giving them, but he was very famous for saying that if my workers can't afford to buy the item that they're producing,
mhm.
then there's a problem. Then that's like mismanagement of the business.
Right.
You,
And
you know, like,
his was very, that's a very practical way to think of it, in terms of like when he says it, because he was making cars,
yeah,
you
well,
know.
and from his point of view too, another thing to think about is, let's say you're a massive business, and let's say you've got a workforce of like 20,000 people or something.
Yeah.
If if they're excited about what they're doing,
mhm,
and if they're able to afford what they're producing,
mhm.
you've got yourself, your organization has got 20,000 new prospective customers,
Right,
you
right,
know?
right, right. And it makes it also makes people feel um like they're a part of it, and that they have a well, I mean, yeah, I guess from a Christian perspective, they have dignity,
Yeah,
that they feel good about being a part of, the 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 company in which they're working for, and I
yeah.
think that that's something that all companies should really take into consideration. Um, I sup- I don't know if a lot of the big wigs that we would consider today think that way. I'm sure that you know I'm sure that people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and whoever else think about stuff like that. You know, um,
Yeah,
I don't
though
know to what degree, but yeah.
the
Hmm.
world is so muddled now, though, that the integration of or the integration of morality into economics, it's not something it's not something self-evident to people anymore,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how would we make it a little more? What's the solution to make it a little more self-evident? You know.
Well, I think first and foremost, people have to embrace and live the gospel. Yeah, because I think in so many cases, people who become like masters of industry, people like your Henry Fords and your Jeff Bezos and all these people,
Mhm,
I think that they begin to perceive themselves as being like little kings,
mhm,
and that they built
mhm,
their own little kingdoms,
mhm, mhm.
and
Which
that
I mean, which
somehow,
in a way you could say they
yeah,
kind of
yes,
have.
but the thing is, they begin to view that little kingdom as if it is all their accomplishment and it's no one else's.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and the thing is, you have the long-standing example of European monarchs,
mhm,
the ones who made it all about themselves. They ended up sowing the seeds of either their own destruction or the destruction of the next generation, you know?
right. Okay. Mhm, mhm,
And the ones who were really, really talented at kind of building out the kingdom,
mhm,
and not thinking about themselves, thinking about, okay, well, this person is really good in this role, this
mhm,
person's really good in this role, we need to do away with this stuff because this stuff is outdated, we don't need that anymore, what we need to do is
mhm,
move on to this.
mhm.
That set those kingdoms up to persevere and to be strong, you know
Right. Right.
and in many ways, I think that the history of kind of like the tycoons of the Gilded Age in America,
Mhm,
the current generation of business leaders in America. I think that the history to compare them to are more. Well, I think that the historical figures to compare them to would be like monarchs.
right.
You
Right.
know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully they understand they've been anointed and have a mandate, and they do the right thing. You know. Um,
Yeah, something that I always remember is so a friend of mine, uh there's a big grocery chain throughout the southeast
mhm,
that's based in Florida called Publix.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I think they have like, I don't know, like 1,300 or 1,500 stores now.
Okay.
Massive company.
Yeah.
Um and a friend of mine, her grandfather started working for the founder of Publix, George Jenkins, back in
Mhm,
like 1940, 46 or 47 or something like that.
mhm,
And Publix had only been around for like 10 years or something at that point, 10 or 15 years.
mhm,
And I remember her saying that at that time, the founder of Publix, the owner of Publix, George Jenkins, whose
mhm,
family still own the chain to this day,
mhm,
that if you worked for him and you needed and you wanted to buy a house,
mhm.
he would offer to put it down, to throw the down payment down for you, and he would even co-sign on the loan for you.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and the thing is, you know, those are the kind of, you know, that notion that the leadership class, that they have a responsibility to the people that are actually making everything happen, day to
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
I think that was present in America,
Yeah. Yeah.
back then. I mean, of course it wasn't perfect, but
Yeah.
I think in many ways, I don't think that's around anymore. You know,
Yeah.
because morality is such a far-flung concept from the box that we're permitted to think within the
Mhm.
confines of.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's I think like we've been taught, well, I mean, we live in a much less Christian environment, in terms of,
Yeah,
I think our sense of morality and moral compass. So I'm sure that has a big part to play in it, right?
big time.
And the whole idea of being charitable, and
Mhm.
charity and stuff like that is just, really not there. I mean, I feel like a lot of things have sort of broken down, um, culturally and socially in this country, where we're having to sort of revive a lot of that,
Mhm.
almost, um,
Well,
or
and at the end of the day, this is the thing. If if a business does astoundingly well,
Mhm.
then why shouldn't the people that were working the day to day, why shouldn't they participate in that? You know?
Right, right.
And ultimately that is, I think that is a lingering question in the world of economics, in our society, in our culture. And I think that gets to the heart of like the the left, I don't really hear it anymore, but remember how like 5 or 6 years ago they would say like eat the rich, and they would say that that billionaires should be made illegal, and stuff like that.
Mhm,
Well, you know, I disagree with them,
mhm.
but I think a lot of left wingers, I think they have a very, very strong sense of justice, you know,
Right. Yeah.
and I think ultimately, if they could really specifically put it into words, what they would say is that the working class should participate, that the working class should somehow participate in the excess fruits of their labor.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm,
if
mhm,
you have a company that did excessively well,
mhm,
like beyond what's average,
mhm,
instead of taking all the extra money and putting it into bonuses for the executives, and putting it into stock buybacks, where the
mhm,
company just goes onto the New York Stock Exchange and just buys up a bunch of their shares of stock to artificially juice the price.
mhm.
Why shouldn't they offer a bonus for the people that really made it happen,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. You got a good point, man. You got a good
Yeah.
point. That's some
the
good. Yeah.
the thing that I'm really happy about in the time that we're living in now is that it's becoming more and more acceptable in Republican circles to say the things that I'm saying.
Yes. Okay. Mhm,
Because back in, I don't know, like 10 years ago, you know 10 years ago, you would have been looked at, they would have looked at you like you had like a horse face, or like you had a, or you would just like, I don't know, like you just said something completely uncouth and crazy, you
right.
know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, at that same time, they also would have given you the same look if you would have criticized the war in Iraq, if you would have said Iraq was a mistake,
Right.
or if you would have said, hey, the government being allowed to read all of the, to read in database the emails, text messages, and phone calls of U.S. citizens isn't a good idea. A
Mhm,
lot of them would also look at you like you were nuts back then, too, in the same way.
right.
But what I hope is that we're moving more into a time where beyond efficiency, beyond like conversations about what structures ought to be, which those are important conversations.
Mhm.
Um, I think we've been missing. I think those conversations have been very hollow and void because we've been missing the moral component.
Right,
You
right,
know?
and yeah, and nobody really. I think a lot of people were just turning the other way, and they didn't really want to act on that, right?
Yeah.
Because of
Do
maybe being fearful.
do you think the woke movement is the left trying to fill that void of morality that that
Yeah,
they feel?
that's a yes. I mean, to be honest, I do, yes, because I think wokeness really, I agree with people like Peter Thiel and JD Vance and a lot of them on this, where it's like wokeness has become sort of a religious movement, in and of itself, that sort of, what they call like a hyper Christian concern for the victim,
Yep.
kind of thing. And and then but then there's no sense of reconciliation, you
Hmm.
know. Um they just want to like, continuously harp on that, or is it called harp or LARP? I don't know. But
Yeah, harp. Yeah.
yeah, they want to continuously, use that as a way to um sort of, because they don't have anything else to really offer, right? And I think they know that if they as long as they're continuing to sort of breed this sense of resentment and hostility and like you'll never be forgiven and all that, if they stop doing that, they know they're going to have to go back to, I think, a point in which they have to really recognize Christianity, right? And
Yeah.
recognize that with the sense of justice also comes reconciliation and forgiveness. You know what
Yes.
I mean? And that's something they don't want to do because it shatters their whole idea of Christianity being this thing where we're gonna we're always gonna be with the victim, and and all of that. And it's like, well, do you ever think that like you always being with the victim, maybe you're turning the person that you don't want to forgive into a victim too now? You know what I mean? That's how I
Yeah.
think of it. You know what I mean? Um, so yes, I would say wokeness is definitely um a I think a way for them to compensate for their unwillingness to actually recognize the gospel as a as a as a as a as a thing of reciprocity, right? Okay, yes, we America is not perfect. Yes, America has done certain things to minorities that were unfair and unright, right? But seeking that, like saying, okay, hey, we acknowledge that. We're sorry about that. It also takes someone to say, hey, you know what? I forgive that. You know what I mean? We're gonna find a way to reconcile with each other and you know be sort of, and yeah, it might sound very cliche or very like, oh, we've heard this many times, but it's like, okay, if you can't forgive, which is, and I'm not saying that that's like easy to do. It's not, especially when something very painful has happened to you. You're like, man, it's just hard to let that go. It's hard to
Yeah.
it's hard to get over that. But I think as a nation, um we've got to do that. I think it's essential, because I don't see how we're gonna really be able to move on, you know.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, so yes, I very much do. Sorry, that was a long,
No, 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 no.
long.
And one other question I want to ask is, do you do you do you see any relationship between the woke movement's focus on like on personal, because it seems like the woke stuff, they try to say it's about these big abstract iniquities and stuff from history and everything, but I don't know. It seems like they're dealing with their own sense of sense of wrongdoing and sin.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
think there's any relationship between that and the big great American revivals of like the Great Awakening and stuff like that, where you, I mean, remember, like you would have people in tents like writhing in pain, like saying that they could feel the, feel hellfire on them,
Hmm. Hmm.
from all of from all of their built up and pent up sins
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and that was almost like a cleansing for them.
Right.
um Now, I think you and I would say they just need to go to confession, but that's
Yeah.
probably but that's probably the only thing that they would have hated more than their sin themselves, is the concept of going to confession.
Yeah. I mean,
Because I guess I'm just saying I don't know, it seems like it's this big national movement of all
mhm,
these people getting being very emotional and like pouring their heart out about how 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 uh how much wrong they believe they've done, and
mhm,
how uncaring they've been to their fellow man, and how
mhm,
selfish they've been, and
mhm,
maya culpa, maya culpa.
mhm,
And I don't know, I see I see a parallel between that and all the big revival movements that
mhm.
would spread like wildfire, throughout the United States.
Right.
And the Great Awakening and the first and second and third Great Awakenings, those were classic examples. But you also had massive revival movements that would rock through the United States, and that really, and still to this day, that that do. But
Yeah.
the only difference I would say is that, at least at the end of the revival movements in American history, there was a sense of reconciliation.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm,
people would end up feeling the sense of, okay, I have rededicated myself
mhm,
to the Lord. Yeah,
mhm,
and I'm going to personally walk with him and everything.
mhm, mhm.
But the woke movement, they don't have that.
Right. Right.
They can
And that's
only writhe in their sin,
yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. 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 And that's because there's a fundamental, I think there's a fundamental disconnect from like a fundamental disconnect and a willingness to be disconnected from the Christian message in totality.
Yeah.
What I mean is like again, they want, so the whole thing of being concerned for the victim and being concerned for the, you know if like, we talk about Rome and everything, right? Like the Romans were not concerned about necessarily the widow or the slave
Mm.
or the, whatever, right? And so that was a big, I think, component in which Christianity gave people who were considered lesser than, um, a sense of dignity, that they were human and they needed to be cared for and they needed to, right? But somehow, like, you get to the 20th or the 21st century, and it seems like we want to look for victims everywhere. And anytime there's a point at which people feel like they're being uh, victimized, we have to get behind that thing, right?
Mhm.
So the whole thing with like Ukraine, right? It's like, well, we gotta get behind the Ukrainians, they're
Yep.
victims. The LGBTQ, we gotta get behind the LGBTQ
Mhm.
because they're victims, right? Uh, the BLM thing, we gotta get behind the BLM because they're victims. Palestine, we got to get behind the Palestinians because they're victims. You know what I'm
And then
saying?
Israel, they're
Or
victims.
Israel, yeah, they got to get behind the Israelis because they're victims. So it's always this, and that's what I think when people describe it as hyper Christianity, that's what they're
Mm.
saying. It's always a thing of, we're looking for the next victim machine. And that's what it means to be woke. Like, I'm woke because I know, you know precisely how this thing, and we gotta, and a lot of intellectuals, the thing that I find very distasteful about them is that they'll try to come up with intellectual explanations for, all this stuff. But it's just like what you're really trying to say is we need to advocate with the next victim movement. That's what they're writing about, and they're
Yeah.
trying to, make it elaborate and very complicated and use these, very complicated discourses and words. But it's like, really all you're doing is just, virtue signaling, right? And so yes, I think that is the thing that they lack, is the sense of like, okay, we're aware of the shortcomings, you know, but they don't, the woke people, I shouldn't say woke people, uh, people that subscribe to wokeness. I think on one hand, I don't even think they are really aware of where that awareness for the victim comes from,
Mm.
right?
They
So
just take it
that
for granted.
they take it for granted. And on top of that, not only do they take it for granted, they consider like the possibility to say that that came out of a Christian framework is distasteful to them too, because they
Yeah.
were saying, how can you how can you believe in a religion that um played such a big part in victimizing people, right? um by that I mean, they would say, well, look at Europe.
Hmm.
Look what they did across in the rest of the world, across the world, right?
Hmm.
Why would you ever want to be a Christian? Look what they, right? And they don't want it. They don't, you know. I think this is getting into like a very historical thing, but it's like, okay, man, they lack the sense of understanding that like this whole thing of wanting to return to a pre-Christian way of thinking in religion is like that is they those the pre-Christian religions would have not even thought about the victim.
No.
They would have said, in fact, the victim is necessary in order they need to be sacrificed. We need to
Yeah.
use that's that's the enterprise, you know what I mean? And how we sustain our civilization. You know what I'm
Yeah. And
saying?
and yeah, the pre-Christian civilizations what would have been like, yeah, you know what? We're gonna rip your heart out now
Exactly.
to the
Exactly. Like, what are you know what I mean? Or they'll spit on you or something like that. How dare you talk to me like that? You know what I'm saying? Yes, you should be sacrificed. The gods demand it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So yeah, yeah. I mean, I just think there is a sort of, mm, you know, maybe it's a misunderstanding, and they don't want to take the time to kind of uh re reassess, you know, why they think the way they do, and if that really has any relationship and roots in a Christian framework, which I think it totally does.
Yeah.
You know, I think it totally does.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so that's the, and I know for me, a lot of people are like, man, you're black. Why should you shouldn't even be saying this? You know what I'm saying? But I'm like, but I'm a Christian though too.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? And I that's and that's another thing, right? We talk about identity,
Hmm.
right? Where does your identity really lie? And I think that's probably the biggest fundamental question for a lot of woke people. Their identity does not lie in Christ.
Well, and that's the thing. Your identity can either lay it could either be a biodeterministic,
Mhm,
a identity an identity derived from biological determinism,
mhm,
or it's derived in baptism. I
mhm.
mean, really, though, those are your choices.
Yeah, yeah,
And you can try to concoct some other thing, so some alt path or something, but
yeah,
it's not gonna make any sense.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Well,
the
because
that's the fork
yeah,
in the road.
yeah, yeah, because you can't.
The woke people don't have baptism.
Yeah, they don't have baptism, and I think also
And
at the same.
they hate biological determinism because they can sense. I think they can sense that it's bullshit. You know?
Yeah, yeah. They probably sense that it's bullshit, and also there you can't return. And I've said this before. Like I don't think you can return to a a real pre-Christian worldview. Like
No.
you can't. You know what I mean? And it's not even that like you shouldn't. It's I think it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
Because the way in which the pre-Christian world worked, like we modern people would find that very distasteful,
And
even though we think in our minds that
they
like
wouldn't accept it. You know,
yeah, they
they
wouldn't
simply
accept
would
it. They
not
would,
accept it. They'd be like, hell no, 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 we're not going
yeah,
to do that.
right. So it's a little almost like from the religious component, it's a little bit like it's diluted, and it's been diluted by Christianity. You see what I
Hmm.
mean? So people are really interested in all these other religions and stuff like that, but it's like, but you don't really want to go back to that time, though. You really don't.
No, they
You know what I mean?
they have no idea what they're asking for. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. That's my thing. You know what I'm saying? And it's funny when you talk about it, but it's like it's not funny because it's like the
Mm-mm.
reality of it. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah. I just think modern people, we are so far removed from
Yeah.
the reality of antiquity that you know I think a lot of people in the West we've romanticized that instead of really
Yeah,
understanding.
the noble savage, right?
Yeah,
They try to, yeah. But
yeah,
that's all such a crazy concoction, you know?
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, all right, brother. We don't went all around town.
Yep. I think we solved all the world's problems. In the I think we fixed them all.
Yeah, yeah. No, no. Yeah, this was a great conversation, man. And we're gonna have to talk a little more about economics, and maybe we can talk about some economic anthropology. That'd be kind of cool.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So okay, brother. Till next time, man. Let's do
All
it
right, man.
again.
Peace.
All right. Ciao.